Hello, writers. I'm Valerie Isan, and this is episode 46 of the podcast, and it's November 30th, 2021, as I record this. Our main topic today is the introduction of our brand spanking new co-host, Erick Mertz. And I think I'm just going to read his bio for you. Over the last 15 years, Erick has provided high-quality ghostwriting services to a diverse array of clients across the world on a wide assortment of interesting projects ranging from nonfiction and memoir to fiction and screenplays. Books he's ghostwritten have been published in major publishers and gone on to receive critical acclaim. Many of the screenplays he's written for clients have been optioned by producers and eventually produced. And in addition, he works as a developmental editor and did my book too, which I was super grateful for. And Erick is widely published as a featured journalist and music reviewer with recent nonfiction essay pieces published by Nestucca Spit Press. Did I say that right?
Nestucca.
And Oregon Coast Magazine, among others, 1859 Magazine, and Aviation History Magazine. His short fiction has been published in Goldman Review, The Bethany Reader, and Terminal Earth Anthology. And his screenplays have been recognized by some of the biggest contests and organizations in the business, from Austin Film Festival to the Story Pros to the Nicole Fellowship in Screenwriting. Welcome, Erick.
Wow, I can't believe I've done all of that in my life. It seems like a lot.
So,
good to be here.
Yay, I'm super glad that you decided to join me on this podcast experience. And why don't you, I'm going to throw you under the bus here. Why don't you start by telling everybody my favorite story about you, the Apple story?
Oh, the Apple story.
I think it's a great introduction.
I was thinking of the Apple story earlier today. So I have a son. He's now 7. But when he was about 2, he would go to my mom's house on Friday afternoons, and she'd babysit him while we worked. My wife and I worked, and my mom was bringing him home one afternoon on Friday, and she asked him, do you know what your parents do for a job? And Elijah said, well, my mommy makes people feel good. Which makes sense because my wife is a massage therapist, and for a 2-year-old, that's pretty good connection. And then my mom said, "Well, what does your daddy do?" And my son thought about it for a second, and he said, "He eats apples." And that was because every day before I go down to my office, where my office is in a basement in my home, and I grab an apple and I go. And so at 2 years old, my son thought that I ate apples for a living, which I do eat an apple every day. So I guess that's like, he's not inaccurate, but I always thought that was a really funny, kind of, the writer's life is interesting enough as it is. And then when you try to, in the mind of a 2-year-old, it gets even more interesting.
So I remember the first time you told me that story, it was also in conjunction with kind of not a career shift, but kind of. Do you remember?
Yeah.
Do you want to say anything about that?
Sure. Yeah. So as funny as that story is, it remains, I still laugh about it every time I tell it. At the time, it really made me think. As a ghostwriter, I have an opportunity to work with, like my bio says, I work with a lot of people from all over the world, very interesting people. But when I'm done with the writing, the work is theirs, and it's their name that goes on that. And it's satisfying to see clients succeed, but they're succeeding with work that I wrote. And so when he said that, I immediately went into kind of like, not a career shift mode, because I'd always been writing my own material, my own books. At that point, I said, okay, I'm really now need to focus on writing my own stories, and make that sort of like my A job, like as much as important as ghostwriting. And so that's when I started really putting the Strange Air series of paranormal mysteries into play. Like I felt like I had to do that. eventually I would love it if my son understood what I did for a living and he could, point to a book, on a shelf, or, whether that's a digital shelf or a bookshelf. That became really important. So it was a really big motivator.
And how long ago was that?
I would say that's about 5 years ago.
And what have you published since then? You have the Book of Witness, right?
Right. So as, coming out of that sort of like, okay, what am I going to do with, like, what am I going to focus on publishing wise? I recognized that I had been writing in this Oregon-based series of paranormal mysteries for a long time. That I'd been, the short stories that I'd been working on, the novels that I'd plotted, the things I'd written, half written, whatever, like all the things that I had in process were really sort of circling around a series of paranormal mysteries. So I started working on, I did what I'm really big into Unsolved Mysteries. It's my favorite TV show of all time. It's the best. It's always been my favorite show. And so I started writing these short paranormal mysteries, short stories that were witness accounts, sort of based on the mythology that I had crafted around this paranormal world. And I started writing these short accounts, and then I published them as collections of short stories. And a number of people really liked them. But I found that there was only so far I was going to go with writing a bunch of short witness accounts. It had to gather around something. So about a month ago, I guess it's a little less than a month actually, I published the first novel in that series, entitled Permanent Shadows. And that takes the series from a collection of short accounts, short, witness accounts, unsolved mystery style mysteries, to a longer, more traditional mystery series based on a central character, a central place, a cast of characters, really. And in the process of writing Permanent Shadows, really, I found that there's a half a dozen other books that I started and ideas that I'd really, that I'd love, but I didn't know what to do with. So it really took that focus to, like, around from that, like, Apple story to, crafting that main character, and then deciding that's the character that's going to carry the series through.
And that's the sheriff.
That's Sheriff August Melville. So Sheriff August Melville is a small town sheriff in a town called Whistler's Grove. He's grew up in that town. He's kind of I look at him like the kind of quintessential good sheriff. He wants to do the right thing. He's a good guy. He just has discovered early on in his tenure as sheriff that he might be overmatched by some of the things going on in his town. There's a lot more than just, speeding tickets and burglaries to deal with. He's got sort of a paranormal presence that's coming to life in his small town, and he has to, at one hand, he has to overcome his own skepticism about, the paranormal and the unexplained. But then at the same time, in his life, there's been enough unexplained and questions from his own life that lead him to believe that this might be something real. So it's about his gradual acceptance of that. And, then it becomes more about how he balances the duties of a sheriff with the curiosity he has as kind of a paranormal investigator.
Very cool. I can't wait for the next one. Have you started working on the next book?
The next book is, I'm into draft number 2 pretty heavily. That was my NaNoWriMo project, was to rewrite the second book called Chasing Shadows. So I am not going to finish today with the rewrite. As we discussed, I will have that rewrite done probably on Monday. So I'm very happy with it. It takes Melville from his first encounter with the paranormal, and this book will deal more with his connection, his family connections to, some of the strange things that are going on in Canyon County. It deals a lot with kind of how the police force and the local officials, who's on his side, who he can trust, and who he has to work around. So it's a lot more about a kind of establishing, how he's going to have to proceed from here on out. And it's been fun to write because he really takes the story over. There's some times when there's times when my character does things that I don't expect, and I love it. Those happy moments when you put down you pull your hands off the keyboard or pick the pen up and say, wow, I didn't know that was going to happen, and I love it. So there's been a lot of that in this book.
When you started writing, you said you've been writing these paranormal mysteries for years before you kind of knew it was going to be a bigger thing. Have you always read or written the paranormal mysteries, or are there other genres that you are drawn to?
Well, I'm definitely drawn to, I read a lot. I read fantasy and sci-fi, and I write some fantasy. I also have a fantasy series that I've been working on, and I have some science fiction that I've written. But I do ultimately find myself drawn to the unexplained. And it started back when I was younger, and I would read the newspaper. Now I'm dating myself because I call it reading the newspaper, but I'd read these like little stories, and I would create the where what do I know and what do I not know about this story? We talk about a crime or an incident, and I'd always fill in the gaps of what I didn't know with something that was not easily explained. I would fill in those holes. And so it just got to become just the way I would think about crafting a story. Like how can we use the uncertainty in a story to our advantage, to the reader's, excitement. So I've always had that idea for the paranormal. And it goes back to Unsolved Mysteries. I adore that show, and I always love the little you get 10 minutes of a mystery, and you'd go to commercial, and you wouldn't have all the information, and you'd quickly okay, what could have happened, and what it set me up in my writer brain for enjoying uncertainty.
So you've been telling us that you've written all these prose paranormal mysteries, but you're also a ghostwriter, and I know that you really enjoy writing screenplays. So why is this not a screenplay?
Well, that's funny you say that, because I wrote part of why I'm at this juncture with this series is I started writing it as a screenplay, started writing these story ideas as screenplays. Anyone who's written a screenplay knows that you don't have any interior experience with a screenplay. It's you're writing entirely in the exterior, the action and the dialogue. And I wrote a couple of the scripts that I wrote based on Strange Air stories, early Strange Air story ideas, went on to one of them won an Oregon Screenwriting Award, another one won the Austin Film Festival Award, or was a finalist in the Austin Film Festival Award. But I was just never really happy with exploring the surface of the characters. I always felt I would write those scripts and feel like it was missing something. And now that I'm writing in August Melville's head, the sheriff's head, and I'm actually getting to write some scenes from the points of view of some of the other characters in the world, it's so much more satisfying. And it's just where I want to be with those characters. And then there's the reality that when you write a screenplay, you're ultimately, as the writer, handing it off to a director, a producer, an editor, who are going to take that story and they're going to shoot it and direct it and edit it, and they're going to put music over things that change there's so many things that happen from that original word to the story that you see on screen.
That's a whole other art. It's a whole other art piece.
whole other art piece, and you're writing a blueprint. Now there's certain things that I like, I've enjoyed the process of writing that blueprint. But for these stories, I think I just have too much more invested in them personally, to hand them off to somebody else. Now that's not to say that, if I can get some more traction with the stories, and they start to if they reach that level of interest, that I wouldn't want to write the screenplay.
And you have the knowledge of how to do that. I think that
Right.
that's probably pretty awesome, actually, skill to have. You write your novel and then you write the screenplay based on the novel, and then you can option that off.
Right.
And still, yeah, I think that's great.
Yeah. It's definitely a different world if we're talking about screenwriting. It's storytelling, but it's just not as immersive, and it feels a little bit more like, you're on the outside looking at a story and how it comes together. Whereas I feel like with a novel, for me, and I would love to know what other novelists feel, but like I feel like you're coming from the inside out, and you're externalizing what's inside. And that's just when it came to, once I got August Melville down on the page, we were kind of cohabitating. And that's a great feeling. I love it.
So I'm going through my list of questions here. We answered that. Well, why don't we talk about how we met? That sounds like a good, appropriate place to go in this little interview with the new podcast host.
I know I said I wanted to talk about this, but now I think if we don't have the same memory, it would be an interesting, twist in episode 1. I remember meeting you at Willamette Writers probably,
I think it was like 10 years ago, wasn't it?
Probably 10 years ago.
Yeah. They have an annual, Willamette Writers is the largest writing organization in Oregon. They also have chapters in Washington now too, I believe. And they have an annual conference. And is that one of those annual conferences?
Yeah.
I met you at the bar. I think that's where we met.
At the bar, definitely. And I just remember feeling like in a conference, and we should probably have an episode dedicated to conference mentality, or like, writer.
For sure.
It's such a fascinating place to go as a writer, is like you spend all of your time, or most of your time, in a, like I said, I cohabitate in my office with a character, and then to take that outside and to go hang out with normal people in a
network
hotel. Pardon?
And network.
And network, right? It's really, it's an odd feeling. And I think when I go to conferences, I definitely try to gravitate to people who I feel like I can be as close to the writer I am in here in my office, out there with, and Valerie, I always felt like that with you. Like
we became conference buddies.
Buddies.
Yeah, every year. Eric.
Yeah.
Let's hit the bar as soon as we're done.
I think I was called Maverick for a little while.
You were. That's right.
Right.
That's right.
I like to tell the story that my parents named me Eric because they were driving a Ford Maverick across the country, and they kept looking at the dashboard. And I don't know if that story is true or not, but it's worth telling once in a while. So
it is, and I think you brought that up to me because I asked you if you spelled your name with a C or a K.
Right.
And you said both, like Maverick.
Right. I do. C and a K. That's how you know it's me. There's very few of us out there.
Yes.
But yeah, I think definitely conference buddies. And then, we've kept in touch over the years, talking about writing, working together on things, on each other's manuscripts and things. And now
for a long time, I hosted the chapter, was a co-chair for the Eugene chapter. I should say, for people listening, I'm from Springfield, Oregon, and you are in what Portland town are you in?
I'm in Portland.
You're in Portland now. Oh, okay. I thought you were in weren't you in Gresham for a while, or Oregon City?
No, I've lived within a mile of, so I have 2 houses in Portland, and they're within a mile of each other. So always in Portland.
Okay. Portland and Eugene. Right on. But you also lived in Eugene for some short time too, I think.
Right. I went to college in Eugene. So I was there. I'm not going to date myself, but long enough ago that when I go there now, I look at it and say, is this really the place I live? Only vaguely familiar. Some of the restaurants I ate at in college are gone, and that's what happens, right?
So at one of those Eugene chapter meetings for the Willamette Writers, you came down from Portland and spoke to us about monsters. That was really fun. Yeah. Was that the only time you spoke for our chapter? I think there was another one too. I thought maybe not.
That is the only time I've been to Eugene on Willamette Writer business. Yes.
What do you like about monsters?
Boy, how long is this podcast supposed to be?
We're going to wrap up in just a minute, but that'll be a cliffhanger.
Well, I can succinctly answer, and then we can talk about it in another episode. But I think monsters are interesting because as writers and story people, like, because we're all readers and we all view television and we take in stories. I just think as we've become more sophisticated in what we watch and read and listen to, I think monsters have become far more interesting. It's not white hats and black hats anymore. And so what you can do with a monster is far more compelling today as a writer than it was probably, years and years ago. Your monster can be your lead character, like in Breaking Bad. You can write the whole story is about the monster. And so I think we have far more to play with than we ever did before. And I think that's super exciting.
In the Stranger Mysteries,
yes,
your monster is unnamable, unknowable.
At this point,
at
that one book in, it's unknowable. But that's, as the story evolves, the monster becomes, at first I look at the monster from Melville's point of view as it's the unknown. This is the sheriff of the hometown should know where all the bodies are buried. He should know all of these things. And as he takes on the job, he recognizes that what he thought was the sheriff's job was not the sheriff's job. That uncertainty, there's forces at play that he's not aware of. And these things those things begin to evolve into a monster that we'll see, soon. Maybe at the end of this book, we'll see a little bit of what that monster looks like. And so, but I really thought it was the most fun monster to play with in introducing that character is, let's take the certainty that person has. If you're, again, the sheriff of your hometown, you should know there should be some certainty there. The people, things. But when you take that away, it really puts that character out on a ledge and puts them in some precarious situations. And because I adore him, it's hard. It's fun and hard to write. And that's where I know I feel like it really works. But
nice. I'm excited to read the next one. The first one is for sale now. Permanent Shadows is available where? Where can people find your book?
Right now it's on Amazon. I haven't decided to publish wide yet. That's a decision coming down the road. But right now it's exclusively on Amazon.
Right on. And that's Permanent Shadows by Erick Mertz, EC in the Erick, and Mertz is MERTZ.
That's me.
What are you reading right now?
I am reading a book called Stay Hidden. It's by a Maine mystery author named Paul Doran. So a little side note, my mom works at a Friends of the Oregon City Library bookstore. A little plug to them. If you're in Oregon City, that's the best bookstore in town. But I set my mom with a list of, like, these are authors I want, genres I'm looking for, and she brings books by the bagful. And I discovered this author, Paul Doran, and he writes a series of mysteries. And what's interesting about it is it's not your normal cop or sheriff, but it's told from a game warden's perspective. The guys, the men and women who go out and you kind of deal with hunters and fishermen and those kind of characters. And so it's a crime series, but from just a different legal perspective. And I also love it because, as a fan of Stephen King, we've seen one side of Maine, and that's the kind of quirky small town type. And so I think this guy shows a little different side of, Maine, and it appeals to my small town kind of. It's small towns and and then people who live completely on the fringe. And he's really good at relating to those characters. They feel really real to me. So
What's the author's name?
Paul Doiron, Doiron.
Okay, I'm gonna have to check it out.
The character his name is Mike Bowditch, and he's just a really great character. And you can read all the mysteries out of order too, since there's not really like a progressing storyline. So I've been picking at him, and as my mom finds the books, which is kind of makes it a fun discovery. So what are you reading?
As usual, multiple books. My husband and I are reading John Steinbeck's Travels with Charlie at night before bed. And I am reading Seed to Dust by Mark Hamer. He's a gardener, so it's nature writing. And then I just started I am a newly certified 3-story method editor, as you know.
Wow.
As you know,
what
Bob.
Is that?
And they're one of the people that I trained with, one of the guys in my cohort, his name's Adam, and he recommended a mystery series by Charles Todd. And so the first book in the series is called Test of Wills. And he recommended it because Charles Todd writes such great setting. And I am particularly interested in writing better settings because that is a weak point for me. And in my rough drafts, I don't write setting at all. I just get 50,000 words of something out. And then I go back through in subsequent passes and add in the setting. So I'm trying to figure out what good setting would look like for the current work in progress. So I thought maybe I would start reading his books. So Test of Wills, Seed to Dust, and Travels with Charlie.
3 books. That's a busy bookshelf. That's a busy nightstand and coffee table.
Yeah, there's usually other ones too, more referencey stuff that I dip in and out of, but those are the ones I'm reading most times.
Well, I won't leave you out on that ledge. Actually, I often cheat on my regular book. I'm actually reading some books I have a client who's hired me to write a script, and she sent me multiple books, and these are the best clients in the world who fill up my shelves. But so I'm doing a lot of research for her project. I can't really say what that is because she said we have an agreement, but it's some early 20th century history, and it's just been a fascinating dive into a part of the world I had no idea about. So
very cool. So speaking of ghostwriting, then nice segue, dude.
I did that on purpose.
Where can people find you if they're interested in ghostwriting or want to hire you to be their ghostwriter?
You can find me at www.erickmertzwriting.com. And I blog regularly on writing and ghostwriting, the business of ghostwriting, editing. I'm always writing something about the topic. Just when I think I've run out of things to say, I find there's a whole slew of other things to say about the journey of writing and ghostwriting.
Well, thank you for being my guest and the co-host.
You're welcome. Thank you for inviting me.
I'm excited about our new adventure together.
Oh, absolutely. I'm really looking forward to it. Thank you very much.